Woohoo! Welcome once again to another episode of In the Library of Graphic Literature, the comic book DNA series. Yay! This is number 3, and this is, I guess this is where things begin to get serious with the comic collecting, and my comic book DNA becomes far more complex from this moment on. So, let's set the stage. It is 1971. I think this is where it takes about a year or two to happen, but this is how I got caught up in the whole shemazel from there on. And it actually starts with one of my all-time favorites, The Fourth World by Jack Kirby. Blah, 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 blah. This would be 1971. Now I did buy, and at the time, even though I wasn't really collecting comics, this was a comic I actually bought on the stand because for some reason I thought it was really cool. I still wasn't too sure about who this Kirby guy was and why he was back, but this looked pretty interesting. So I picked it up, and tells the story of how Scott Free became Mr. Miracle, taken over from Thaddeus Brown, who is murdered early on in this, and of course he comes back to wreak havoc and revenge on him, stuff Buddy in jail like any good superhero. And I loved it. I mean, having as a sidekick Oberon at the time, which was very, very new. I mean, my God, Kirby was always ahead of his time. Now, that being said, like I said, I can remember buying that, but another one I do remember, and like I say, I'm getting very close to becoming a comic book true fanatic at this point. I still don't know a lot about Kirby. You know, I knew that during the 60s when I was a kid, I didn't really like Kirby. I thought he was too squarish, and for some reason, for some insane reason, I didn't like the Thing, which is hilarious because, where is he? Oh, he's down there. Since then, when I became Kirby conscious, when I achieved Kirby consciousness, I realized that the Thing was a really coolly designed character, and you know, the imagination that goes into every single thing he did just amazed me. But at this time, I was getting used to the new Kirby, and I bought this comic, New Gods number 4. And I even remember where I bought it. I live on an island, large island, like 7th or 8th biggest, after Cuba. Anyway, to get from Nova Scotia to here, we have to take a ferry. So we're waiting for the ferry to leave because, I mean, you'd line up and you'd be there for hours. So our parents let us loose into the nearby community, North Sydney. And I can remember going over and finding a store there and, of course, seeing this cool comic. And I bought it. And I mainly bought it, actually, just because it said, oh, Ryan. Having the last name Ryan, I thought, oh, this is cool. But I read it and I thought, geez, this is really cool. I like this Orion guy with that very, very cool astro harness. I mean, this stuff to me was just, even then it was starting to say, wow, this guy's pretty good. And I don't think I still made the connection that this was that Kirby guy that I wasn't huge on. But I would start to realize that later, but also around the time that I would realize what a genius he was. I gained Kirby consciousness. Boom, 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 boom. Now, before we get into the Kirby consciousness, we'll get to the book and the very individual comic that basically all started rolling for me in terms of turning me into a pure comic book collector. It was December of '73, so I was about 12 years old, and you know, I wandered into a drugstore, actually that's just about a block up from where I am now, and because a lot of times I'd be working with my dad at his warehouse, and once 5 o'clock came, he'd be there for at least another hour or so after all the employees left. So a lot of times I'd go up to the drugstore, poke around at the spinner rack, and I found this little gem here. Dun, 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 dun. Or this one. Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. And I'd always been a Legion of Superheroes fan, and I said, oh, this is a new Legion of Superheroes. And of course, you know, I knew who Superboy was, and I know who Bouncing Boy, Brainiac 5, and Duo Damsel. So when I picked it up, I was like, oh, it's like old home week, and they got this brand new headquarters, which I kind of liked, and because I never really liked the upside down spaceship, let's be honest. But what I liked about this was the art. It was just like off the hook, as they say. Just every page better than the last. Kind of reminded me of that Adams God that I'd seen here and there through the years. And oh, there we go. One of my favorite parts of this was this huge double page spread of the wedding. And of course I'd look in and I'd see, I could name just about everyone in the crowd too, even then, including Martian Manhunter. Now there were a few of the Wanderers and stuff like that I wasn't sure about, and other ones, but I knew most of them. And so it was, I became a huge fan of it. And it really, this is the thing that really got me into the comics. And I love Cockrum, and still did right up into, and this is why, as a matter of fact, when I seen Giant Size X-Men a few years later, that I picked it up, because it was just like, now, this is that Dave Cockrum guy, and he's doing this new Legion of X-Men, so they've got to be good. And man, was I ever right. Now, of course, there were a couple of other things that came along with the Legion of Superheroes, and of course one of them was one of my old favorites, Batman. Bum, 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 bum. And this time it came in the form of The Brave and the Bold, which is a comic I'd seen when I was a kid and had bought a few issues of here and there. I actually had the issue where Green Arrow got his new costume. So I figured, oh, this looks cool. Mr. Miracle, too. Of course, so that sealed the deal. It was just like, oh, Batman and Mr. Miracle. And this is where I began to fall in love with Jim Aparo, who we'll talk more of as we go on. One of the most amazing artists for DC in the 70s. And and they were the 100-pagers, too, which I fell in love with. So anytime I'd see a 100-pager, I would pick it up. So a lot of these were from the 100-pagers day. Oh, where's it? Come on. The Atom. And of course, including with this was a Brave and the Bold with the Spectre, and Batman. And I mean, that just clinched it. I was a Spectre fan now at this point too. And this was Aparo doing the Spectre and Batman. So they had me hooked. Now, as I was growing up, of course, I was more of a DC man, but this was around the time too that I started to wet my toes into the Marvel pool. But in the meantime, I continued buying comics, buying lots of DC comics, buying all kinds of DC comics. Superman action, detective, let's see what else. Just about anything cool. Like when first issue special came up that looked cool, and anything that I thought was cool. And I'll never forget this one in particular. This was OMAC, One Man Army Corps. And to me, I'll never forget seeing this on the stand, because when I looked at it, it was just like, what the heck is this? What kind of story is this? What is this person taken apart, disassembled into this crate about, and who's this weirdo with the mohawk throwing that right at us? And it was all about the world that was coming. So, I read that and I was like, oh, it's that Jack Kirby guy. He was that guy, and it's around then that I really started to sort of put things together. And this one, I can remember, I was starting to get Kirby. I mean, I like this energy of his, and the characters seem kind of cool. But uh, it was a mixture of comics actually. But I think the one that really sealed the deal. Oh, hang on a second. The one that really sealed the deal for me was. Let's see. Was number. Was Fantastic Four number 78. Now at the time, this would have been. This was more back. It wasn't 78 in which I came across this, but it was the reprint of this. In the 70s, Marvel started reprinting, of course, a lot of the Kirby stuff to offset the fact that they had lost him, and they reprinted a lot of the Fantastic Four, including this little baby here, number 78. And I can remember buying this on the stand. Like I say, the cover's slightly different with the different trade dress and all that, and started reading it. It was like really cool, and especially this here. This was when I gained Kirby consciousness, when I realized what an ingenious thing Kirby Crackle was, and this was the comic that did it for me, and it was just like so cool. And of course, after reading that, I then went after the next issue. I had to have the next issue because it was just like, hey, this Kirby guy was actually pretty good. And this is what I love, that cover. And classic. Like I say, at first I didn't like the thing as a kid, but this is around when I realized that Kirby was a genius, the thing was cool, and that I had a lot of comics to go back and buy. And what I always liked about this, though, was once again, and it really was the use of the Kirby Crackle that brought me around. But then the action, this was just absolutely amazing. And so this, like I say, this Kirby guy, he'd got me. But he hooked and baited me for good. And this is when I started collecting this comic, Commandy. It was Commandy number 32, actually. I'd seen it for years on the stand, Commandy, the Last Boy on Earth, blah, 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 blah. But I bought this one, and it was amazing. It was Jack Kirby, and like I say, this is when I really started to realize this capped it off. This is when I knew that Kirby was a bloody genius. I mean, look at that. This guy could draw, this guy could tell stories, this guy had action. He had it all. And now meanwhile, I was buying other comics. And so I started to, like I say, I'd started with the Marvel's Greatest Comics with the FF reprints. And now in between too, I'd seen some other stuff. Like this was one from, oh God, this was a Marvel team up. And I actually had this issue. And it was from 72. So this is a little bit before, we're reaching back now a bit towards the start of the show. Actually, I should have had this on. And it was this particular one. And I recognized the art style from Gil Kane. I recognized this is the guy who drew the Atom and Green Lantern when I was a kid. And it's funny because this is one of the most reprinted stories, I'm sure, in the Marvel catalog. I don't know how many times it's in the X-Men. It's in, oh God, I don't know how many times it's been reprinted. It's in the Morbius thing. But it looked kind of cool. I bought that at the time. Or did I see that when I was when I joined the Altar Boys? And I only joined the Altar Boys because they had this huge cabinet filled with comics. And I do believe that was one of them in it. Now, like I say, I started to branch out from there, and I came across this one that a friend of my brother's, he had this comic, and he gave it to me, and I read it, and it was just like, oh my God, this is cool. And it was only after I started reading it that I started to realize, oh my God, this is the guy who was Captain Marvel with that white and green outfit from when I was a kid. And it was just like, oh, I like this, and I read the story. Great story. Great inking by Al Milgrom too, by the way, on Sterling. But it was an amazing story, and of course then I became a Sterlingite, a very, 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 very hardcore Sterlingite, as I like to think of it. And it just went down from there. Now, meanwhile, I did start to explore other ones. I did buy a Marvel team up with Spider-Man, the Vision, and Scarlet Witch, and that would seem to, whet my appetite, and I started buying Avengers, a few other ones. But this was one of the first new characters that I bought. I remember seeing this on the stand, Deathlock, and I was like, oh, this looks kind of slightly gruesome, but interesting. And so I picked this up, and I absolutely loved it. It was one of Rich Buckler's finest moments. And it was just like even though it was sort of an homage to $6 Million Men, Steve Austin was no Deathlock. And the whole series was great. I actually preferred the episodes in which Klaus Janson inked them, but what a series. What a series. What a guy. And then, of course, back to my days as an early Starlingite, once Captain Marvel ended, I was like, okay, where am I going to get my feed of this Jim Starlin guy? And in February, it was actually December of 72 that he came out in Strange Tales number 178. Now, I didn't have this at the time. I bought back, and I did get hold of this one in the end. But I think the very first one I had of this was, let's see, it was when they had what's his name, Thanos, and the Magus involved, and it was this Warlock number 10. Steve Lealoa was doing it. Tom Morskachowski, Marv Wolfman there, along with Mr. Sterling, and it was absolutely amazing. I was just like, oh my God, the Sterling guy is back in this. He's done amazing things with this Warlock character, and of course I was smitten, and I followed it right through to the end. Funny enough, this one also has in the back of it the reprinting of the two Sterling annuals from '77, the Avengers, and I think it was Marvel 2-in-1, which was sort of the end of poor old Adam Warlock at the time. And this one has been reprinted just like the other one. I don't know how many times, in how many different volumes, whatever. So, I was fully ensconced in the comic book world. Comics were great. Nixon was out of office. The world was starting to make sense once again. And hang on a sec. I just noticed that one of my lights is not. Oh my God, there. Okay. And the world was starting to look nice and bright and cheery, like it is now. Anyway, this was one of the first new series of Kirby's that I started to collect when he, in '76, he moved back to Marvel, which kind of surprised me at the time. It was just like, geez, I thought this guy had apparently hated Marvel. Learned a lot more about that in the future. But this comic came out, The Eternals. Once again, it was, and I kind of liked the fact it was kind of like not a rip-off of Chariots of the Gods, but more like, sort of inspired by, I like to think, because The Eternals was anything but Chariots of the Gods. Great series. I bought it all the way through, and like I say, I was fully immersed in the Kirby camp by this time. I was replete with Kirby consciousness, and it would only deepen from there as I go into it in my next episode of my comic book DNA. So my comic book DNA will continue into basically the 74, 75, and this is around the time that I really started to draw comics a lot. I met my good friend Jerry Porter, and we started working on a comic together, and the world of comics just exploded from there on in. Especially the year 1977, and you'll hear me talk about that in detail anyway. But anyway, that's it. This is how I went from a normal comic book sort of peruser, somewhat buyer, to an absolute comic book fanatic and fully Kirby conscious, fully developed my Kirby consciousness. I was able to reach out, tell stories, tell when a story was good or not, and it just went from there. And I'd never seen, and still to this day, I'd never seen someone with such an imagination. I mean, the characters, who comes up with people like, or things like Lockjaw, even Arnim Zola, some of his latter ones, Commandy, that Astro Rig, the Astro Force thing that Orion had, the entire fourth world. I mean, oh my God. And of course, one of my favorite things of all was Black Bolt's costume. I mean, that was pure out and out Kirby. So anyway, we'll continue on next week. There'll be, from this moment on, there's going to be a lot more Marvel, but then there's going to be a lot more independent, because this was the Flourishing. That's the next episode. The Flourishing. I like the sound of that. Anyway, that being said, it's a snowy day out here, and and I can hear the police. They're coming for me. No! Anyway, this is going to be a special episode. This will be put on the same week as the next episode, which will be with some new comics, and Luna will be back and hanging with me, and we'll have a great time. That being said, thanks for having me over, and feel free to write in the comments about your comic book DNA. What's the biggest strand in your DNA? How about that? That sounds great. That being said, I love you all. Bye!